Hello everyone, welcome to Blogging About Your Work, our webinar for today. Today is Monday, June 25th, 1 p.m. Eastern Time, and we have all of our panelists here, so I'd actually like to go ahead and get started. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay. If you have any trouble with audio or with video during the presentation, please feel free to use the questions box or the chat window. A couple of quick items for webinar housekeeping before we jump in. A recording of this entire webinar will be available on the blog in just a few days, and all of the links that I'm showing during the webinar will actually be available during the webinar and afterwards at the link you see on your screen. It's probably easier for you just to go ahead and follow along on my screen, but I just wanted to let you know that those links are there. All of the microphones, except for our presenters, everyone's microphones are muted for now, but you can use the questions panel or the raised hand button during or after the presentation if you have a question. Now before I go any further, I just want to let you know there might be some noise in the background on my microphone. I live in Florida, in the northern part of Florida, and we got hit pretty hard last night by our tropical storm. And our power in my house went out about half an hour ago, just in time for me to run up to the nearest Starbucks and log on. But I obviously want to keep my voice kind of low, not to disturb everyone here, and there's music and people having coffee, and also my daughter is with me. I couldn't leave her at home by herself. So there could be a fair amount of noise in the background on my end. I'll try and keep my microphone muted as much as possible. But if the noise is bothering you, by all means, just type me in a message in the chat window or into the questions box. So today we're happy to have with us 5 panelists. They all have extremely different blogs and extremely interesting blogs. We're going to be hearing from Tara, Jessica, Joshua, Laura, and Brett. The way that we're going to run this today is that each of them will take a few minutes to show you their blog and a post or two that they think is representative of their work. They'll talk about those and how they work with their blog, how they write, how they developed the blog in the first place, if they developed it themselves. And then we're going to leave lots and lots of time for questions and answers. We hope to have about half an hour for Q&A. So without further ado, I actually, unfortunately, have to show you all the introductions. Let me start with Tara. Over the last 5 years, Tara was told by a lot of people that she should start a blog because she has so much enthusiasm about conservation and insects are very little understood. She wanted to do the blog, but it seemed like a lot of work. So finally in December, she went to the Conservation Biology Conference in Auckland, New Zealand, and attended a workshop by Corey Bradshaw. His blog is conservationbites, BYTES.com. He talked about how he spends just 1 or 2 hours on each post and only does 1 or 2 posts per week or less. And she felt like that didn't seem like such a huge commitment. And he talked about how many more people had read his blog than had ever read his publications. So she felt like that was a good way to go for us, especially for a non-scientist outreach. And she wanted to start a blog to get her research out there, but also just to offer a different spin on conservation information. Something a little bit more positive research than doomsday that we tend to see in the media now. She's had a good 6 months, and she looks forward to reaching more people. So let me go ahead and escape out of this and show you her blog. I've got a few too many screens here. I had to jump into. All right, her blog is called Conservation of Biodiversity. Hopefully you can see it on my screen. If anybody has trouble seeing my screen right now and conservation of biodiversity, please go ahead and use the raise hand button that's listed on your GoToWebinar control panel. Otherwise, I'll assume everyone can see my screen. And Tara, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, great. Thanks. Hi, everyone. I'm Tara. As Lauren mentioned, I got this idea for this blog. Well, I've had this idea for this blog for a very long time, but I finally started it in December after attending this workshop at the Conservation Biology Conference. And ever since then, I've had a pretty good run. It's been about 6 months. I have almost 40 followers, which is not too much, but I'm trying to get more and more, and I'm just starting to get people commenting a lot more frequently and liking things a lot more frequently, and I've gotten some emails from people, too, about doing even guest posts and that kind of thing. So it's taking off. Lauren asked me to talk a little bit about starting a blog since mine's pretty new and I decided to jump in. I was really worried about the time commitment before I did this, but it actually hasn't been that too intense. And I've decided to keep it as like one theme, which I think is really important if you're thinking about starting a blog. Just pick one theme and stick to that. Otherwise, it can get really messy, and you can get kind of bogged down, and you can get away from it, and then people will sort of stop coming if you get away from your theme. But also, I don't make my posts too long. I am also a DK through 12 fellow, so I help teach high school students, and so I've gotten fairly good at teaching conservation to a lay audience. And I think that's really an important component of my blog. I really wanted to stick to lay language and to not get too scientific. If you go to that one blog I mentioned, Conservation Bites, you'll see that he kind of writes his posts as if they were mini papers, and most of the people that go to those are also conservation professionals. But I was trying to keep mine open for just a lay audience. And so I do that, and that helps me because then I don't have to, it's not like work for me, it's more like fun. So that's something that I've decided that helps me keep my blog up, because I don't think of it as like another thing that I have to create a works cited page for, something like that. So I try to keep it short, less than 1,500 words. Usually mine are even less than 1,000. I do about 1 to 2 posts per week. Mostly lately it's been 1. I was just in Costa Rica, and actually I think Lauren's going away from the main page. But this post here that you could see that everyone poops is actually a study that I did in Costa Rica. So I just relate it to whatever's going on in my life at the time. And then the post you just went to is something specific for my dissertation research. So stepping back a minute, another reason I started this blog is because my dissertation research is very focused. I work on the endangered Ohlone tiger beetle, which you can see pictured at the top of my blog. Very beautiful. But it's very specific, and I have a ton more interest in conservation than that. And so another reason I started this blog is for professional networking, so that I get my name out there. People can come to my blog, and they can also see a lot more about what I think about conservation, as well as my philosophy for conservation, and that sort of thing. So I try to write about my work, which is the easiest thing for me to do, but I also try to write about other conservation issues, sustainability, conservation, other published papers that have happened that I find interesting. So this one in particular is about my work, something that I published in April, I believe it came out, so I wrote on that. I also put lots of pictures, which is another important thing for blogs. And then here is another post that Lauren just showed, connecting the dots, which is something that, a really good example of the things that I do besides my work. I try to teach the people who read my blog a little bit about conservation, again, keeping it lay, as well as you can see some links to words that people might not know, like ephemeral or adaptation. I try to think, my dad is an electrician, and he doesn't have too much schooling, so I try to think if he came to my blog and read this, like what would he not understand and have to look up? So I think about that, and that's how I choose what words to link to. And I think those are just like Wikipedia links, or maybe even online dictionary links, so people can go and just read the definition or something like that. So yeah, so this is a post, and this is, so this picture here is a picture I've taken. I'm writing here about ephemeral water sources for dragonflies, and I try to just put pictures that I take up, because it can get tricky if you just take photos from the web without any citation. So here's a great example. This is the dragonfly that I'm talking about for this study, and in this case, the site for the picture who took it is actually on the picture. The person who took the picture is on the picture. So that's really great, and I don't feel bad. I don't have to cite it. But I try to just use my photos, just because, in addition to being fair and trying not to steal people's work, WordPress, which is my platform, which is a very good platform, by the way. It's free, and they've got a ton of different themes and styles that you can choose. Really easy to work with. You can change the post wherever you are, write a quick post if you want. You don't have to go into it, add photos, that kind of thing. So when WordPress actually looks for blogs to showcase that use their own photos and use their own work. And if you steal too much from the internet, they are less likely to showcase your blog on their main page, which is where you get a lot of traffic. A lot of bloggers will look on WordPress's main page. They have large categories like sustainability or nature or travel, and they'll put your blog in there, and you're more likely to do that if you have just your own work. All right. I started this blog, like I said, to get more conservation out there. I try to take a more positive look at conservation as opposed to sort of like the doomsday one, which I found myself teaching a lot in the high school classes and undergraduate classes. So I'm trying to take a more positive look. Like this post, for instance, Connecting the Dots, talks about a lot about how human disturbance can actually help species. I find that a lot in my work, so I relate it back to my work as well. So I try to do that. That's sort of my theme, I guess, of my blog. And I find that doing this blog, not only is it really great to get my philosophy out there, but also I'm reading a lot more of papers and articles that I would want to read, not necessarily that I would be able to read for my dissertation work. But and I'm getting to know a lot of the people that I should know for my future work, postdocs and jobs after I graduate. And so it's been great for me just getting out there and reading what I want to read, as well as networking a little bit as I talk to people when I read their things. Ask them some questions sometimes, want to do a blog post about their work.
Sarah, let me cut in for just a minute because I want to just give everybody a chance to give a quick intro, and I think we've got a great idea of your blog. I think it's fantastic, and I was so happy that someone with a new blog was able to join us today because I think that's where a lot of our fellows are. But we'll leave some time for question and answers at the end to find out a little bit more about how it's going. Okay, cool. Let me go ahead and move on to. Hopefully, I'm still sort of struggling a little bit here with my links to the LA Creek Freak blog. Such a great name. This is done by fellow Jessica Hall. Jessica's a landscape architect who's known for her advocacy for urban stream restoration in Los Angeles. She dedicated the last 12 years to mapping historical and remaining streams, documenting their histories, and developing proposals for their restoration, including modeling restoration scenarios. She was phasing out of watershed coordination work when she conceived the blog LA Creek Freak with LA River and bike activist Joe Litton. They have a co-blog. They're co-bloggers. While they are the primary contributors, bloggers Jane Song and Joshua Link have also become part of the Creek Freak team. So this is a team blog. Jessica's interest in starting LA Creek Freak was to provide the public with information about LA's historical ecology, so very similar to Tara in that she's reaching out to a non-scientist population. She was particularly interested in talking to the public about the creeks and wetlands and to communicate the possibility for restoration. And, of course, also to call out the lack of an ecologically based restoration ethic in a lot of the stormwater, watershed, and urban planning that's currently taking place in the region. So, Jessica, let me turn it over to you without further ado.
Okay, great. So the topic I was asked to speak to was really about the time commitment, and I guess over the long term for doing a blog. And I can't say that I actually have that experience that we were just talking about where it's pretty quick. I actually end up spending anywhere from 4 to 8 hours on a post, unless it's something really quick. So, and that's partly because I think the audience that I'm communicating with has really no knowledge of ecology, certainly not in the Los Angeles basin. And so there's a lot of background to be conveyed. And I do a fair bit of research to either bring in historical quotes to my pieces, or I do research to find other web links or other resources on the web that can provide more information to the things I'm speaking to. And I just find that this ends up sucking up 4 to 8 hours of my day. And so it's been really good for me that I've been part-time employed the last few years because I've really used that extra time to do things like blog. And as I'm moving into a full-time position for my work, I don't really know how much more frequent or extensive my posts will be. What you have up on the screen right now is a short piece that comes out of an email. Sometimes people email me announcements about relevant events that are taking place, and those are really quick to get up. And I generally don't even provide necessarily a lot of background unless it's something where I think readers need context. And if you go to the one that you had up earlier, the What Would Snow White Say? That was a post that took about 3 or 4 hours to put together, and mainly because, again, this is a sort of an announcement about something that's happening currently, but I needed to prepare some graphics to help illustrate my points. And so you can see I did these compare and contrast with what's in the EIR and what what the existing condition is. And so I don't know what that's about, the thinking guy. But anyway, so these things end up taking time. And to me, they're worth it because what I'm trying to do is help people who might want to write a letter, a comment letter on the EIR. I'm helping them frame their comments in a way that's very quick for them. And so that's one way where I take a sort of activist approach. And then if you go to the other one, Thankful on 37 Gallons of Water a Day, this was a more long-form piece where I really wanted to get across the concept that people in LA have no acceptance of, that we could actually survive on our local water. And so I walked through it as a complete argument, even calculating what our native safe yield is down to what that means when you compare what that would mean per population with what you have internationally in terms of water consumption. And so I'm really trying to help walk people through these bigger concepts that are somewhat at odds with, I think, conventional wisdom about Los Angeles. And that does take time. And so that's what you see going on there. And I've been doing this since 2008, or 2008. And I've really enjoyed it. In some ways, I wish that this is what I was being paid to do instead of just doing it for fun. Because I think that these are messages that need to get out and that don't get out very often. And I could keep talking, but I think I'll just cut it off at that for the moment.
Okay, thank you, Jessica. Thank you very much. You have a blog that I actually knew about before I even went back to work for Switzer. This was a blog that I read on a regular basis. So it's a good indication that, you know, if you stick with something over time, you get a lot more followers, and it really does take time to build a blog up. So yes, we can talk about that more a bit after for Q&A. So next we have Joshua Wickerham, who is actually with us from Asia. I'll let Joshua tell you where he is. But he's a sustainability consultant based in Chiang Mai, Thailand. He works with a wide range of stakeholders and works for a lot of different kinds of changes, but mainly visionary, measured, and long-term environmental change. For the last 10 years, he's centered his work in China, where he advises major international nonprofits and about sustainability standards like the Forest Stewardship Council, Roundtable on Sustainable Biofuels, and Good Weave, Responsible Jewelry Council, and on China engagement and strategy. He also helps exceptional Chinese companies communicate their sustainability credentials with the world, which, as we know, is becoming increasingly important for beleaguered Chinese companies. Joshua got started blogging in 2002 when he first moved to China to teach English, and he's since become what he likes to call a serial blog founder. He regards his past blogs a bit like sand mandalas, which get destroyed soon after creation. He started his current blog, which is www.joshuawickerham.com, in 2005 in order to provide and build a more professional profile, to highlight his writing and to draw attention away from what he calls his past indiscretions of blogging, which were those earlier blogs he had destroyed. Joshua, welcome.
Thanks, Lauren. I hope everyone can hear me. Raise your hand if you can't. It's a pleasure to be here even at 2:20 a.m. in Chiang Mai. Basically, my blog is very self-serving. As I've transitioned into independent sustainability consulting, I try to make my ideas and my personality friendly to business and commercial interests, while at the same time retaining my activist roots and the causes, and staying close to the causes that I'm passionate about. So my posts are a mix of kind of what I've been doing for the last year, which is this post that you're seeing now, to a letter that I wrote about Apple and their work in what they needed to do to avoid PR disasters in China, to my past webinar with Switzer. I just kind of, it's a mix of, this first post that you're looking at now took maybe 4 or 5 hours to write because I wanted to get every detail right, and I modified it soon after I posted it. And just kind of talking about myself in a way that can sell more of my consulting services, while at the same time kind of making people aware of what I'm doing. And I bought this .com on a whim in 2005 and just started throwing up pieces that I had been writing. I was writing for a magazine in Shanghai at the time about the development of Chinese civil society or HIV prevention efforts, etc. And I've since written encyclopedia articles on entrepreneurship or the history of Chinese sexuality or various topics, and I just kind of throw them all up there. And I guess those past indiscretions were when I had a more activist bent in college, and also kind of irreverent blog posts that I know that I wrote before I cared that the default mode of the internet is to save and to forward on to others. So this blog has kind of collected a lot of links over the past and comes up high if you search my name, or if you search for topics that I write about. So I'm happy with my high Google ranking, and I hope to keep it. I've had one job that I know of come as a direct link to people searching my site for various topics. I recently taught a sustainability course on visionary leadership change to young up-and-coming executives and managers in Shanghai, kind of introducing them to what sustainability with Chinese characteristics is like. And that's something I never really expected to be doing. And so I think other jobs have come kind of if a potential employer wants to know something about me, then they can go there and find probably whom they want to know. But I'm also thinking about transferring this work into a consulting company that's branded separately from my own personal brand. So I kind of think of this as a transition into that kind of a consulting branding. So I'll stop there.
Super, Joshua. And I was really happy that you were able to join us. I know it's 2 in the morning, and this is the second time we've done this to you, having a webinar that's convenient for us and incredibly inconvenient for you. So I thank you again for being with us. And I just want to let everyone know that, we've been emailing several times this idea that your Switzer profile comes up very high on your Google search results. But I think that Joshua's blog and Jessica's and Tara's and anyone really who starts a blog, what's really important to think about is that the more you post, the higher your blog will be in the search results for your name. And so it's a way to control the information that's out there about you, because people do only tend to visit the top 3 or 4 search results in Google for someone's name. And so you have the ability in a way with a blog to do even more than push information out about a topic. You're really pushing out your brand, which is what you were talking about, Joshua. So thank you for showing that. I hope that we have some questions along those lines. Let me go ahead and move on to Laura. Laura Westlund is an energy analyst with the Union of Concerned Scientists, where she focuses on developing state policies that will ultimately effectively increase the amount of renewable energy that's used in California. She provides technical and policy analysis to legislative and regulatory agencies to successfully guide the implementation of the state's renewables electricity standard, and designs effective electricity sector climate change policies in accordance with the state's landmark global warming bill. In addition to the blog that she runs, we also ran a webinar with Laura earlier this year that you can find on our blog. Laura, let me go ahead and turn it over to you.
Okay, thanks, Lauren. I'm happy to be here, excited to be here. So Lauren wanted me to talk about my experience with being part of a group blog. So I'm one of about 25 bloggers that's part of the Union of Concerned Scientists blog, which is called The Equation. So Lauren just put that up there. The web address is blog@ucsusa.org. And I'm in the climate change and clean energy program. So I'm mostly posting about clean energy issues, mostly about California, because that's where my office is and that's where I'm mostly focused, but also try to respond to issues happening in other parts of the western U.S. But as you can see on the right-hand screen, there's a drop-down menu for categories. So we have folks in our organization that are posting on biofuels issues, food and ag, climate scientists, vehicles, and so it's a range of the work that we do. And so UCS launched this blog about a year ago. One of the reasons was to showcase the individual work of the analysts behind UCS. Usually when we're working for UCS and writing reports or working with policymakers, it's on behalf of the organization. We're not really speaking about our personal views on things, or we don't have a lot of opportunity to showcase our personality and some of the things that we've been thinking about as individuals. So this is an opportunity to get more personal and put some faces behind the name of the organization. And we've also found that it's a really good opportunity to do more rapid response work. So a lot of the work that UCS does is producing reports that take upwards of a year to produce, and a blog has been a really great venue to respond very quickly to decisions that have happened, to newspaper articles that we either think are great or feel that there's a need for a different perspective. So because things have to turn around so quickly, I actually find that I can't really spend more than a couple hours on the blog. There's so many other things happening that it's more like I see something and I want to put something out there really quickly. So my blogs tend to be between 300 and 500 words. I try to link them to either a report that's come out or a newspaper article that I've written and I'd like to respond to. And one of the really great things is that when we write reports for UCS, there's a huge vetting process to make sure that our positions are consistent with other things that we've been saying, and there's obviously a very rigorous peer review process. But for the blogs, they've been pretty good about making sure that it's edited for grammar and all that kind of stuff. But they really have given us a lot of freedom to be able to editorialize a little bit more, which I've really appreciated. So usually when I write something, it has to go to a web editor, and they're able to turn it around in a couple hours. So that's been a really good forum for commenting with other people. And one of the things that we're still kind of working out the kinks is, because we have so many analysts working on these issues, when an issue pops up and we know that someone needs to respond, we still haven't figured out who that best person is to respond. And so that's usually it's a flurry of emails or phone calls to say, oh, I'll do a post on this, or I've been working on this issue, so I'll link it to my work. And we're experimenting with different ways to communicate amongst our offices and have some more dynamic and just better ways to brainstorm blog ideas and make sure somebody is responding to something that's happening real time, but make sure two people don't write the same blog or blog about the same thing. So that's been interesting, and I think a new and different thing for us to experiment with in terms of communication amongst our offices. Yeah, and I think that's about it. I guess I'll leave it at that and wait for questions.
Laura, could you talk to us for a minute about your specific post, the Imperial Valley Gets Some Sun?
Oh, sure, yeah. I just realized that you put that on there. Yeah, so this is an example of something that I responded to pretty quickly. This is an article that was written in early April, and it was an announcement that the Imperial Valley, or the Imperial County Board of Supervisors approved 600 megawatts of generation capacity. So these are projects that are planned to be built, and I thought it was important to respond to this and put a blog up there because there's been a lot of discussion in California about the environmental impact of large-scale renewable energy projects and kind of the pros and cons and why we are approving those projects and what are some of the negative impacts and when is it appropriate to build a large-scale renewable energy project and when is it not appropriate. And so in this case, the projects that were proposed for the Imperial Valley were the final agreements were the result of many, many months of coordination and stakeholder negotiation with some of the conservation groups that are listed here. And I thought it was important to not only highlight the fact that there are some cases where it can be a win for both clean energy and land conservation. In this case, these are projects that are located on retired agricultural land. But also I wanted to use this as an opportunity to highlight a report that I'm working on. I've been working on a report that looks at the renewable energy investments that the 10 largest publicly owned utilities have made over the past 10 years. Imperial Valley is one of them, and so at the end of this, I posed a question, which is Imperial Valley County Board of Supervisors has approved, given the green light to go ahead with all these projects, but the projects need to have a purchaser of the electricity before they can actually get built. San Diego Gas and Electric had, at that point in time, committed to purchasing some of that electricity, and so I posed the question, you know, is IID, Imperial Irrigation District, which is that local utility down there, are they going to step up to the plate and purchase some of that electricity as well? And I found that that's being a little bit provocative, asking some questions really invites good back and forth between the blogger and commenters and gets people to the page and gets them to share with other folks. And it's been a kind of a fun way to engage with people that I wouldn't otherwise have an opportunity to do.
Super. Thank you. So our last blog to look at is Brett Amy Thelen. Am I pronouncing your last name right?
Thelen.
Is it Thelen?
Yep.
Thelen. Brett
Yes.
Amy Thelen, who has a really interesting blog that I'm looking forward to having her talk about. It's called Ashore Chronicles. And Brett, why don't you take it from here?
So I wasn't actually sure whether I should even participate in this because my blog is a little different in that it's not really my professional self, or at least not my full-time day job as an ecologist that I showcase in the blog. It's another side of work that I've always been interested in but haven't has been kind of a side interest, which is writing and art and photography. And I was realizing that as I do more and more of my full-time conservation biology work, I was doing less and less of writing and that other kind of just reflective personal practice. So I basically started this blog to encourage myself to write more. It turned into more of a photography blog because that's quicker and easier. And I didn't always have something to say about the photos, and sometimes I just wanted them to speak for themselves. But this is still very new, and I'm still learning what I want it to be. But I have been enjoying, I've had people for a while were wishing that I kept my photos kind of in one place, and so this is part of that. And then I'm also finding that there's an interplay between words and photos that happens in a blog format that I think is really unique, that you don't get when you're solely writing a poem or solely or an essay or creative nonfiction. Or solely taking photographs. And so that's been something that I have enjoyed exploring in this blog. I use WordPress too, and mostly because my professional website that I maintain is for my job, for my nonprofit organization, we use a WordPress format, and so I was really familiar with it, and it's really easy, and it's really user-friendly. And talking about I think it was Tara that was talking about photographs that you use. These are all mine, but I host most of them on Flickr as another kind of tool for organizing my photos. And then I only post some on the blog so far as they relate to whatever the theme of a particular post is. And this is very, as you can tell, extremely minimalist. It's very, it's designed to kind of, I guess, stand alone. There's not a lot of, I don't even know if my last name is anywhere on here, so it would be interesting. It will probably never show up in a Google search for my name, but I'm okay with that for now. But, and I'm not sure what else there's to say. Well, Lauren asked me just to talk about.
Before we go to the individual posts, I just realized I forgot to introduce you, so let me do that before you
go
go
ahead.
any further. I'm so sorry. I was so concerned about the pronunciation of your name, I skipped right over the rest of your bio. So sorry about that, everybody. So as the director of the Citizen Science arm of the Harris Center for Conservation Education, which is the nonprofit Brett was just talking about, it's a land trust and environmental education organization in Southwest New Hampshire. Brett's professional life is largely focused on science and professional communications, so newsletters, press releases, reports, and the like. And she mentioned before she also has a strong interest in the literary realm, which was the inspiration for this blog. She serves as the editorial board of on the editorial board of Whole Terrain, which is a nationally acclaimed journal of environmental writing and art published annually by Antioch in New England. And she gets to do a lot of reading and editing, but her own writing and reflective practice had been on the back burner for a good long while. And that was why she started Wash Ashore, which Brett, you've already referred to. She started it just last autumn. And I will actually tell you the reason that I was really interested in having you talk about this is that it is a very unusual blog, but there's a lot to be said for using images and video on the web to get your message across. As you said, sometimes you just want to let the pictures speak for themselves, and that's often a very powerful way to go about things. And of course, what would cost a fortune in print to produce, a full color, glossy brochure that could go out to someone can be done for free on the web. So, color is free and very much a great thing to use. So that was why I was hoping that you would talk about your blog, and I think it's a wonderful one. Let me go ahead and hand it back to you. Sorry about that, and give you one specific post to talk about, if you would.
Okay. So this one, there was 2 posts that I sent, and they both were amphibian related because I'm very interested in amphibians. This one I sent because it's a very short poem, but it doesn't make any sense at all without the picture accompanying it. And that's the thing that I like about the blog formatting, is that you have the option of pairing your photos with your writings in a way that kind of adds meaning to both of them. So this is a poem that I would never read, for instance, at an open mic or a reading, or even potentially put into print because the explanation is in the photo. There's another one I sent, which I guess we probably don't have up, that I also really like because there's a practice that I have observed. It's called This Moment, where you just have a photograph standing completely alone, and the photograph tells the story. And that's another really...
But when you published that one?
That
I
one...
had trouble finding it for some reason.
That
here it is, This Moment.
Well, there's several of them, but that's one of them. Yeah. And I like that for natural history practice because there's things that you capture in a particular moment that don't exist 2 minutes later. And there was another one that I really like, but that's the principle is the same. It might be on the second page. There's only a few pages of the blog, and the one downfall, I guess, of this template which I've used, which is so simple. That's the one.
This one?
Oops, sorry. There was one with This Moment. You passed it with a. Nope, it was newer than that, so go in the other direction.
Okay. I had the link yesterday, and then for some reason, here we go.
That one.
That's a wonderful photo.
And that's another, so that's a thing that you can do, I guess, with photos, that words, I don't know, I think sometimes the photo tells the story, and letting it stand alone and letting people know that it's standing alone has been an interesting practice. So I guess that's all I need to say.
Yeah. No, all of you have said a lot, and what I'd like to do now is actually open it up for questions. So for everyone in the audience, you can either use the questions box and type in a question, or if you've got your computer headset on, you can also use the computer headset. Just hit the raise hand button on your GoToWebinar control panel, and I can call on you and unmute your microphone. So we will open it up for any and all questions now. While we're waiting for that, actually, I'd like to just go to Joshua real quick because I think you're the, other than Laura's blog, which Laura, I'm assuming you didn't do the technical setup in the back. If I'm wrong, definitely let me know. But Joshua, you would have had to do the technical setup of your blogging platform in the background to use your own .com, joshuawickerham.com. Could you talk a little bit about that process?
Sure. I bought the .com with Dotster. They didn't support any of the recent U.S. government efforts to block websites and things, any of that legislation. And then I just use WordPress like almost everyone here because it's open source and free, and I really like it, its functionality. So my web hosting service that I have with a friend included like an install process for WordPress. So I didn't have to get too technical. I loaded the software on the server with a click of a button, and then I could log in and start choosing templates. And I just chose a template that seemed neutral and international and professional. And I also use Flickr to store my pictures, and I have about 10,000 photos that I've used that pretty much for all of my blogs in the past. And I don't know, I just sort of, when I have a a few hours or I've been thinking about something, I'll tinker with it. So I have like an I Ching symbol next to my name on the web address. It's called a fave icon, and you can upload that or just fun things like that. So
super. And it is actually quite easy. There's several hosting companies. I use Bluehost personally, and when you use Bluehost to host your domain, they have what they call a one-click installation of WordPress. So you literally click it, say, yes, I want to install it on this domain. It installs it for you, keeps it up to date. So there are some easy ways to do that for anyone who's interested. We can get you more information about that. We have some questions coming in. So I'm going to just pose this first one to all of you, and whoever's got something to say, by all means, say it. This one's from Cecilia Danks, and she asks, how do you, oops, sorry, I just lost the question. How do you, any of you, get people to read your blogs? Do you record metrics regarding use?
I can start answering that. I'm actually exploring that right now. This is Sarah, by the way. Since my blog's only 6 months old, I'm trying to get more and more people, and it's really important to link to any other social network that you use. Like Twitter is really important. Facebook. As soon as you post a blog, as soon as you do a blog post, immediately post it to your Facebook or to your Twitter or Google Plus or whatever else you use, and your friends will start reading it, and your friends of friends, depending on what your settings are. Also, they have something in the blog world that I've heard referred to as link love. So you link up to other people's blogs as much as possible, and as well as add links to organizations like the Nature Conservancy or Union Christian Sciences, for instance. I should add that to my blog roll. And usually on the side of blogs, they have like a blog roll, and you put links to other blogs, and you do that, then it can show up on their blog. Also, if you comment on other people's blog posts and add your URL, then people will go to your page. So there's a lot of ways to do that, but linking is really important as well as putting in your social networks, I'd say.
Yeah, this is Laura. I would second all that. And then just one other idea is your email signature. When you send an email and it has all your contact info, I have a link to my blog at the end of that, and I've had people click on it just because they've received an email from me. So it's another good way.
And I would, this is Lauren, I would also add, make sure that you put that blog post, the blog link onto your profile with Switzer, because we are turning up very high in people's search results now. And because we post so much content, by having your blog linked to our site, that will actually improve your score on your blog. That's how Google works. It looks and sees who's linking to whom and who's getting lots of traffic, and then pushes it higher and higher in the search results. So make sure that your blog link is everywhere.
Yeah,
you know,
oh, sorry.
Oh, that's okay. I was just going to add, one of the things that I've seen on our blog is we see what gets a lot of hits, and then we might actually then decide to write a series about that subject or do other posts related to that subject.
Yeah, absolutely. And tagging is another thing I forgot to mention. I've noticed that tagging has been really important for me. At first, I used tags that were very specific, like a Lonely Tiger Beetle, for instance. But if you use tags that are really broad, like sustainability or nature or science even, I've noticed that when I use those tags, I get a lot more hits on the post.
And this is Lauren. We're going to move on to the next question.
I just want to mention that I use Google. Oh.
No, go ahead, Joshua.
Just that Google Analytics is nice and it's free, and you just have to embed some code in the website, and then it'll spit out the statistics, and really detailed statistics too.
And that's exactly what I was going to say, so perfect. Thank you, Joshua. We'll just add, I'll put a link to Google Analytics on the blog post that has this webinar and other things. We'll make sure that we include some resources like that for folks. Google Analytics, you know, when Joshua says you add some web code, that might sound scary, but as he knows, it takes literally a second. And it's very, very easy. They've made it such that it's very easy. And with WordPress, there's actually some buttons you can use to embed it automatically without having to know really anything about code at all. So super. Thank you, Joshua. Our next question is from Robert Long. He says, what venues did you initially use to get the word out about your respective blogs? So I think this is a good question. It's a little different from Cecilia's. How do you launch a blog? Who do you tell when you launch it?
Well, I think we told organizations that deal in LA watershed issues. So you go to the organizations that are kind of related to what you're doing, and definitely used Facebook extensively. And I would say that was how we did it, and we really kind of let it spread word of mouth. And just over time, LA Creek Freak has just become this place that people go to when they want to get ideas about something or they're doing research on a topic.
Anyone else want to add to that? No, we have another question. This is from Ryan, and this is a good one because I think it gets at the nitty-gritty of how blogs work and sort of to get beyond just launching one and actually making it run. And his question is, do you have any tips for attracting an audience for a new blog? And then he asks, the secondary question, is frequent posting critical? And so I guess what would be nice is to hear all of your insights on what you all think tends to attract more people over time. We've talked about it a little bit already, but what it is that you can do beyond the tagging.
Well, I think frequent posting is definitely critical. I track my users just using the WordPress embedded things already, and I've noticed that like the day after I do a post, the readership goes up. It's like kind of like a bell curve, but it's sort of like a series of waves if I look over the past month, and each peak is right after I do a posting. So frequent posts are definitely critical to the readership. And I would say at least once a week is important, maybe every 5 days.
This is Lauren. I want to add something that may not be well known about the web, but the way Google uses, in this case I'm just talking about getting into search results, but Google sends out what are called spiders, which are just little pieces of code, and they go looking at websites on a regular basis to see if there's new content. And if there is new content, it reports back, and Google reacts then and says, oh, that's a blog that's in use, that's a website that's got fresh content and currently updated. So I would encourage anyone who's currently doing a blog or even thinking about doing one to find ways to publish not just the longer thought pieces, which are important. The longer thought pieces are what keep people coming back to your blog for new information, but it is important to find ways to post regularly small, short things to keep things kind of lively and fresh, and that's mainly for Google, but also for your readers. So like Jessica was talking about longer thought pieces, but also quick posts that talk about upcoming events. That's really helpful because you'll see with a blog as you publish regularly, even if it's a short piece, Google doesn't show any preference for short or long pieces. You'll see those posts in your blog moving up higher in the search results. So I just wanted to throw that in there.
I think that's a really good point. And, you know, one of the things that I break one of the rules of blogging, which is that you should always have an image with your post. And that's partly because when I'm doing these short posts and I'm trying not to spend 4 hours on something, not putting in an image is how I control myself because it just really keeps me focused on that short thing that's going to keep the blog fresh for the week. And then I can be more thoughtful and have lots of images in other places.
Lauren, this is Laura. I have a question for the other bloggers. So put me in the queue. I guess I could have done that online. Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, well, I was just curious, the other bloggers, do you guys experience a lot of trolls coming on your site and posting really negative things? And if so, how do you handle that? Do you always respond to them, or what are your criteria for responding to completely negative posts?
Yeah, we have two kinds of trolls. I mean, we have the people who are really disagree with what we say and are rather nasty about it. And we also have the people who email us privately and are basically trying to get us to let them be guest posters, but really they are infomercial people. And I think of them as trolls also. I get a lot of requests from people like that. And we have a policy, first of all, that any post has to be related to LA waterways or watersheds in some level. And we prefer to have people that we know are rational and thoughtful people. We've had people ask to write posts who are kind of, you know, they might be on our side, so to speak, on the issues, but their way of expressing themselves is somewhat inflammatory. And we've actually had to ask people, well, we'd like to read what you have written first, and we want, we have certain editorial standards. And along with that, at a certain point, comments to our blog became so hostile that we basically announced that we were shutting down comments and that we would be developing a comment policy. And we actually never got around to doing it beyond sort of the general, be respectful to each other. And that's something that, when you're coordinating a blog with other people and you have everyone has different ideas about what appropriate communication is. And we just never were able to sort that out and articulate that. So we reestablished commenting. We just let it be a cooling off thing. And I think that's something that we're not completely comfortable with, where we left that. So I'd be interested to hear what other people have to say as well.
Well, this is Laura. So, we also, Union of Concerned Scientists, has experienced lots of kind of irrational negative comments on some of the things that we've been blogging about. Obviously, unfortunately, some of the issues that we work on are politically charged, even though they're mostly focused on science, which shouldn't be politically charged. But I'm not in charge of coming up with our blog policies and our comment policies, but I know that they are evolving over time. I think we've wanted to keep the information exchange as open as possible and really try to not delete any comments unless they're just completely irrational and there's no added value to having that perspective. Otherwise, the person that manages our blog is in charge of deciding whether a comment is there or not. So as a blogger, I'm not actually in charge of doing that. So when someone posts a negative comment to my blog, I don't think I have the opportunity to delete it myself. I would have to talk to our web editor. But they do allow us to decide as bloggers whether we want to respond or not. And that's just a personal preference, how much you want to get into it with somebody. I try to limit it to, if someone's posting something that's factually inaccurate, responding to those inaccuracies and not necessarily getting into debates over the web, because I don't think that's very productive. But I do appreciate the fact that UCS keeps it as open as possible, and I think that it's been somewhat uncomfortable for some of our bloggers, especially folks that are working on issues where they get personally attacked a lot in their daily work. This is just another venue for them to get attacked, and so it's been an individual. People have reacted to our blogging or comment policy differently as individuals, and there's differing levels of comfort about how much to allow commenting.
And Laura, this is Lauren. It's very common. My background before I came to Switzer through academia, I actually worked as the online editor for a California newspaper. And believe me, every news organization in the country and in the world struggles with exactly this question as to how far to let readers go and what to allow them to do. I'll make sure that I post a couple of links actually with some information about that, because journalism organizations have given some good thought to policies, both to keep everyone happy, all of your readers happy and productive, but also the legal aspects of it, because there are some legal aspects, believe it or not. Once you start tampering with comments by deleting some and allowing others to stand, you become, as an organization, partially responsible for the content that is left to stand. The idea that you've had some sort of editorial decision-making power actually gives you some legal consequences. So I'll make sure and post some links with that, with the website, so people can think about that a little bit. Let me go ahead and move on. We have a couple questions, too, from the audience. This one's from Dipti. She's saying that, Joshua, she can relate to your analogy because she's created an experiment with multiple blogs on different topics, but not necessarily kept them active. And she was wondering how you deal with blogs that you've created that you don't want to keep up anymore. Do you take them off the web? Do you keep them online but dormant? What have you tended to do?
The first blog I created, my friend's server went down, so it was just deleted on its own. That was about teaching English in China. Then I started another blog called A Backpack and a Keyboard, which I hosted on Blogger, and then I bought my own domain for that. And it started getting really weedy. Links stopped working and sidebars stopped looking pretty, and I didn't want to invest the time to making it look right again, so I just let it go. It was kind of a botched transfer. I was going to try to host it on joshuawickerham.com, kind of hidden away, and it's still there. I could resurrect it, but the original site I just kind of let die. So I don't know. They're in blog heaven now, I guess, or somewhere on Internet Archives.
You hope they're in heaven.
Yeah.
It's a hard thing to decide. I would say this kind of brings up, this is Lauren again, this brings up a bigger issue that I would encourage everyone who's listening to think about, which is your web presence in general. You know, at least once every couple of months, do a Google search for your name and see what comes up. Make sure that at least the very first page of search results are things you're happy with seeing there. You know, make sure that if it's an old blog post that's appearing, it's something that you're proud of. Because it does take time. Google archives posts and archives, when those spiders go out looking for content, they archive it as well. It's what's called the cache. And so even after you take a post down, it can actually live on the web for months, even years, depending on how much new content there is about you out there. So, you know, at the very least, take a look at your Google search results, and if there are old blog posts or old websites or stuff on that first page or two that you're like, ooh, I don't want that there, I would encourage you to delete it as soon as possible, or ask the person who posted it to delete it, because it can take quite some time for it to fall off the radar, the web radar. The web does have a very long memory, as Joshua was saying. Evan, we've got another question here from Evan Hansen. He's saying, other than writing the blog, which, you know, we've gotten a sense from each of you how much time you put into that per week. He's saying, how much time does it take to respond to questions and police the comments? And Evan, if you don't mind me even adding a point here, and to market the blog, how much time altogether are each of you spending on your blogs?
I can answer. Like I was saying, this is Tara again, spend about 2 to 3 hours maybe on a post, or maybe even less depending on what it is. But I also kind of go through and look for topics to write about. Sometimes I just even actually look at the scientific literature, things that are interesting for conservation that I could write about. So I probably spend maybe 6 hours a week, maybe 6 to 8 hours a week on my blog. At least if I'm writing one post a week, for instance. In terms of the comments, I haven't had to do that to police comments too much. A few times I have, but some advice I got from a blogger was to let your audience sort of debate each other. Kind of don't comment back to them, just sort of let them fight each other. So hopefully that could happen, as opposed to you kind of getting involved and spending all this time responding to comments. So I'm not sure other people's philosophies on that, but that's some advice I got.
Why don't we go right through the list in the order you all presented. Jessica, why don't you talk next about how much time it takes you each week?
Well, I would say that it varies a lot from week to week. And so there will be weeks where I might put in 8 to 10 to 12 hours on the blog, and then there will be weeks where I don't put in any time at all. And some of that is trading off with Joe or Josh or Jane. And some of it is, you know, even though we do try to get a post up every week, we don't always necessarily follow through on that. So I probably spend more time on the blog than I think some of the other people here. And the other thing about the comments, we do let our commenters debate each other, but even then we have found that it just spiraled out of control, where it became incredibly personal, the way people were responding to each other, and that's why we did shut down comments at a certain point.
Joshua, you want to speak next?
Sure. I spend almost no time on my blog anymore. I'll moderate comments, but there aren't many. I have a good spam filter. But when I was working less, kind of in a lull consulting at the end of last year and early at the beginning of this year, I started a blog called urbanmicrogarden.org. The idea of people living in urban spaces, cultivating gardens, and posting information about it. And I would spend, I don't know, a few hours a week kind of tinkering with it, telling people how to, writing posts about how to grow your own mushrooms or things like that. But I found that I would rather be gardening most of the time than writing about it. So, I don't know.
I think it's an important point too. I mean, blogs when they're run, to build an audience, you can consider it a pretty big part of your work week. I mean, I'd say at least one full work day has been my experience. This is Lauren speaking, but I would encourage you to think about that people often start blogs on things that are appealing subjects to them, but if there's no motivation beyond just thinking it would be fun, it is very hard to maintain one. It can be really tricky. So Joshua, your personal blog was to build your brand. Jessica, obviously you have a passion for the creeks and that you get the word out, and everybody's got their reasons beyond just it would be a fun thing to do, and I think that's probably common to most bloggers who maintain their blog, that there's got to be something beyond that passion. Laura, why don't you talk about how much time you spend?
Sure. I mean, I think my experience is a little bit different because I'm part of a much larger blog, so I'm not the one spending really any time moderating the posts or the commenters. I make a decision about whether to respond, and if I do respond to a commenter, I usually take about an hour to think through my response and maybe do some research, counteracting something they've said if I feel like it's actually inaccurate. But I agree with the other panelists that a lot of times, and it's something that I didn't anticipate, that there would be discussion between the commenters, and so I was surprised to find that if you just let it go, someone else will respond, and it's not that you shouldn't always feel compelled to respond because there are other people that are watching and reading and will respond for you. And it's kind of fun to host that discussion, but not necessarily, lead it. Put out that first post and put out a provocative question, and then just see what happens.
And Brett, let me let you answer the question last, and then we're actually out of questions and out of time, so it worked out well. Brett?
Well, I don't spend nearly as much time, I guess, as I had hoped I would when I started. If I'm just doing photographs, I'll make a blog post in 15 minutes, and that will be it. And I don't have a ton of readers yet, and there's not a lot of provocative. It's more natural history observation, so there's less opportunity, I guess, for really in-depth conversations. Some blog posts, when they involve writing, will take me several hours. And kind of like Joshua, I struggle with wanting to continue this practice, maybe for different reasons than his, but also just wanting to be outside. And so I have periods where I'll do one a week, and then periods where, like this month, I've only posted once. So it's a challenge for me, and I know that, as we've been discussing, directly relates to whether people will be reading your blog at all. And but for me, I kind of made the decision that it was more about developing a personal reflective practice, and it's wonderful if people read and get something out of it, and if they don't, then I still get something out of it. So I try not to pressure myself to post if I'm not feeling it at the moment, I guess. But so it could take me anywhere from 15 minutes to 3 hours to do a post, depending on content and that sort of thing.
Super. Well, we are out of time. We've gone a little bit over, and I just want to thank all of the panelists for sticking with us all this time, and for everyone who attended. I hope that this was helpful for everyone. I know that I learned a lot about just the diversity of blogs. We actually had, altogether, we had almost 20 bloggers that were fellows, that really everyone could have participated in the panel and had something unique and interesting to offer. So, but we're very grateful to the 5 of you who were able to join us today. This webinar, as well as all of the links that we visited during the webinar, will all be available on our blog shortly, in a couple of days. You can also get more information about our fellows and upcoming events on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. And if you have any questions about the materials in this webinar, feel free to email me directly at lauren@switzernetwork.org. Thanks to everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.